our fourth episode of the Lessons in Leadership interview series, and today I'm here with Tom Natt. Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there. Yes, I'm Tom. I am I'm the director of Third Way Digital, which is a consultancy. I am a fellow of the British Computer Society, and I've worked in tech through my whole career.
Awesome. Well, that is a perfect segue to just talk me through a little bit about your career.
Okay, well, in brief, I started out as a developer. I wrote a variety of different programming languages, some of which are still on my CV, some of which have disappeared mysteriously. And after doing that for about 15, 16 years, I moved into technical leadership in government, and then slowly worked through the levels until I was deputy director of software engineering in the cabinet office and in the government digital service during COVID. And then after that, I joined Macmillan Cancer Support as their director of software engineering, and after that, I'm now consulting.
Um, Something I heard recently and I wanted to ask you is if someone looked at your LinkedIn or your CV, what is it about your career that they wouldn't see if they read through it?
So my career is essentially three things. It's the technology, which is mostly what's represented on LinkedIn. There's a lot of leadership, which is there as well, but also a lot of community building, working with people, um, trying to lead and mentor and coach people to be the best. And I think although it is there, it's harder to spot that side of things because obviously LinkedIn's more about what I've done rather than how I've done it.
Yeah. And who you've helped as well.
Mm. The other thing that you wouldn't see necessarily from LinkedIn is the work I've done around neurodiversity, and both with myself, I am neurodiverse, and things I've written about, organisations I've sort of worked with, and so on.
Awesome. Um, so when we go back even further then, now that you are diagnosed and openly talking about being neurodivergent, how would you reflect on your school and how did school go?
Okay, yeah, I suppose it's worth saying that I'm an adult. I'm diagnosed as an adult, and so it was only last year, in fact, that I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. So obviously, quite late in later on in life. School, I enjoyed school, very much enjoyed school, but there are definitely things I struggled with. I mean, for me, one of the attention was had been problematic at times. Um, Looking back, it was I sort of worked around that by my sort of drive to like want to succeed, and because I'm both autistic and have ADHD, those things, I mean, they don't cancel each other out. But in terms of outward looking, they sort of do. Internally, it's your brain going to war with itself. So the ADHD part of my brain's thinking, "Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm not so sure about that." And that thing that someone was telling me, I probably should have written that down, but I don't know what it was. But the autistic part of my brain is going, "You will not fail. You will succeed. You have to do that. You have to listen to what's going here, write it down, and pass the exam." Yeah, like I say, those bits don't play nice.
No, it's like a lot, trying a lot of new things, but then also having to be perfect at all of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It would be nice if I was perfect at all of them, but
No
that's
one ever is. So when you're in school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you grew up? What you wanted a career to be?
yeah, I did actually. I wanted to be a Jedi, so that didn't work out. No, when I was at school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I was capable of a variety of things, but but I sort of gravitated more towards the mathematical side of things. So I sort of lent into the STEM side of things, and that also was reflective of my home life. Both my parents are the science side of things. Um, but at school, I didn't really know what that meant, and I was thinking about accounting and those sorts of things. And in fact, at school, we did an aptitude test, which had and it was one of those things where I think at the time everyone seemed to be doing it because my friends at university said, "Oh, we did that," and you filled in a whole bunch of stuff, and it gave you an idea about what you what it is that the direction you should take. Um, and my one came out with two things. One, it said I should probably look at being a forester,
Okay.
which appeared to be the default that everybody. I grew up in Leicestershire. Everyone in Leicestershire apparently should have been. I'm guessing there weren't enough foresters in Leicestershire. A friend who grew up in South Wales said he and everyone in his area got sheet leather technician. Um, Again, probably because that's what that area needed. So that was presented to me. The other thing it said is that whatever you do, do not work with people. And I said, for me, the thing that I went through school and then went through university thinking is I don't want to work with computers. So I, again, got to the end of education thinking, I don't want to work with computers and I don't want to work with people. And now I am a director of technology working with people all the time.
People leader.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so how did you go from not wanting to work with tech and not wanting to work with people to working in tech as a developer?
Um, I mean, it turned out that I was quite good at it. So basically, towards the end of my time at university, I got a job on the university help desk, and I got that job by mistake. A friend of mine was already working in that area, and I went over, and he was struggling to fix a computer, and I sort of sat with him and helped him fix this one thing. And while he was doing that, his supervisor appears and sort of went, "Do you want a job?" I'm like, okay. And that was shift work. I did that for a while until my lease was up and so on. But I was quite enjoying it, and I was trying to decide what to do. At that point, my thought was, I'm probably going to end up moving back home, see my live with my parents, then try to figure out like what this life thing's all about. And I said to this supervisor, look, this is shift work. It's great. It's been a great experience, but this isn't. I can't work in this role forever. And she basically dragged me down to talk to the director of the computing services, which was like multiple levels above her, and basically said, "Don't let this one go." And he went, "Okay." Pushed me into a room with one of the senior developers, who asked me a whole bunch of questions and said, "Does this stuff sound interesting?" Well, it sounds interesting, but I don't understand it. And he went, "Oh, you'll learn." I'm like, I was a developer, so I was very lucky. There's a handful of people through my career who've done something that has made a real pivotal change, and she was definitely one of them. Yeah, I mean, she gave me a ton of opportunity while I was on the help desk, where I was doing stuff that, with hindsight, I thought, why on earth was I allowed to do that? But it taught me an awful lot.
What was your first language?
What was that?
What was your first language that you were coding in?
Um, that's a good question. I think it was Perl. So over time, I wrote some Perl. I wrote some Cold Fusion, which is a language that nobody remembers, probably for good reason. I wrote some PHP. I wrote a lot of PHP, but I won't admit to that on my CV. Wrote Java. Wrote a lot of Ruby. So these days, I would say when I'm masquerading as a developer, I'd say I'm a Ruby developer, but I've done a variety of other stuff as well.
Awesome. I like to hear about people's first language. Um, so throughout all that time, we said that you got quite a late diagnosis in life. So you wouldn't have had language to describe ADHD or autism or how these things were affecting you, or even knowing that this was what could be affecting your approach to life or work or school. How did you make sense of yourself?
Well, one of the advantages I had at school was because I was interested in a whole variety of things, like from maths to Latin to all sorts of stuff. And I played tabletop war games and I played video games um, and I had such a broad range of things. I always knew I was weird. And I will say, by the way, a few things. This is definitely about my experience, and not everybody. All these things exist on a spectrum. So my experiences will definitely not directly mirror anyone else's, and I'm not trying to claim that they do. But my experience was always, I always felt a bit weird. I always felt on the outside of groups, which is one of the reasons I spent so much time setting up. Even at school, I was setting up, not deliberately like setting up groups, but like the friendship group, I brought people together. Um, the one of the big things I did at when I was in secondary school was find all the the people who weren't the obvious people. So like they weren't the sports people, or one of the other like the cool kids, and we sort of banded together in this quite a large group of odd people who got on very well and still get on very well. Actually, a lot of that group. And I say that I say odd and I hope that I won't offend any of them, but like finding that value in people that isn't you throw a ball really well
Yeah.
or whatever.
Like a key differentiator
Mm.
or hobby or
Yeah,
task,
yeah.
job.
It's like you're interesting for a strange reason.
Yeah. No, I like that. How then would you say, I guess overall, how was diagnosis journey?
So as an adult, I've always been interested in mental health because I've felt that I've had a problem with depression since basically as long as I can remember. But certainly noticed it in my like as soon as I became a professional. Um, and so through that, I've been interested, like I say, been interested in mental health. I've tried to be as open as I can do, particularly as I've got older and as I've got more senior. I think it's very important that senior folk talk about these things, so that they can sort of normalize it, basically. Um, about 5 or 6, like some years ago, I started to think, hang on a minute, a lot of these things align with what I understand around autism. But it was about 4 years ago that my sister-in-law, who is a qualified speech and language therapist and does formal autism assessments for a living. I mean, she didn't assess me because that would be very improper, but she sort of went, have you thought about looking into this? And I'm like, okay, well, if a professional's now telling me that I should at least consider it, I did. And then last year, I started the year, I'd left my previous role and I had a gap. I thought, this is the time when I'm not throwing myself at a series of difficult problems. If I'm going to do it, now's the time. So I started looking into an autism assessment. Went through the NHS and through their right to choose scheme. And then a different friend mentioned that he was on the same journey. He mentioned that his autism assessment had an issue because he was also undiagnosed ADHD, and in his case, it created a position where he got was it it was an unconfirmed assessment. Like they got to the end of it and they weren't clear whether or not the answer was yes or no. And I knew that that would really annoy me. And so, which is again a trait. And he basically said, look, go through the ADHD side of things first. I know I'm not medically saying that's the right way round because there are definitely different positions on that. But at the time I thought, right, okay. So I went into, I explored that as well. I had very little expectation of the ADHD side of things, because it wasn't something I've been thinking about. But I went through the assessment. I was fortunate to be able to go privately for that, but I did do a lot of work with my GP up front to try and make sure that it wouldn't stay private indefinitely. And to my slight surprise, it turned out that I do in fact have ADHD, leaning towards, ADHD comes in two flavors. There's the hyperactivity and the inattentive, and I think I lean towards the inattentive side of things, which is why it's harder to diagnose. But yeah, I was diagnosed with that first, and then I explored medication, and then the autism assessment came up about 6 months later. That was harrowing, but worth doing. Yeah, and that one came out positive as well. That one I was expecting that one to come out yes.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I might be putting you on the spot here, I apologize. But when we first spoke, we spoke, I mentioned my story about how I was diagnosed with ADHD and they suggested doing the autism. And in my mind, I thought, well, why would I do that? Because aside from knowing that I have it, what benefit does it have? And then you gave a really good answer. It's like why, if you're working and in professional life, you should get a diagnosis. What was that reason? What would you say?
Wow, I wish I remembered what past me said. there are three reasons for me why I went through this. One is around self-reflection. There is having, I suppose we can talk about this more in a moment, but with going through it crystallizes like certain behaviors, certain changes, certain ways of thinking, and go, oh wait, okay, that's because of this and that's because of this. So there's a lot of learning and self-learning, which is, I think, is extremely valuable, extremely powerful. And attached to that, there's also the what can I do about it part, which is the in the case of ADHD, there's medication available. In the case of both of them, there's various types of therapy. And I haven't explored all of these things, but there are these things that there's help that is available. The second reason is authenticity. I mean, I said I talk about mental health quite a lot, and I have done, and I'm continue to do so. Um, and I'm happy to talk, to stand in front of a room full of people and say, "Hi, I've gone through depression," because that's true. Undiagnosed, I wouldn't have been happy to stand in front of a room full of people and say, "I think I'm autistic, and therefore I can talk about these things." We wouldn't be having this conversation if I was undiagnosed, if I was self-diagnosed, because I just wouldn't put myself on camera making claims that I haven't got a medical piece of paper to back up. And I think it's not true for everyone. And again, I'm not pushing this on anyone else, but for me, it's really important that if I'm going to talk about my experience with autism, I need to know that I've got it. um, and the same with ADHD. So that's the second one. The third one is that they are registered disabilities, so there are legal protections that are available. And I've been fortunate that the people that I've worked with have all been understanding to various levels about mental health, but they didn't have to be. And if I'm ever in a situation where it's important, there is it's actually covered as a disability under the Equalities Act. So that is a useful protection that I hope I'll never need.
Yeah, no, it's true. It is. And it's the same with having diagnosis to then speak about it. It's not that people negate your experience, but for you to feel confident talking about the experience, it's more for that backup layer of support internally, and the same for having it in case anything went wrong at work being a protected characteristic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Thank you for going through that. Sorry, that was on the spot. Um, so after the diagnosis then, if you reflect on everything, like what made sense, or how did you feel?
So, so obviously it's different for each of them. For ADHD was more of an upheaval for me because I hadn't really thought about it in detail. In the same way that I've been processing the idea that I might be autistic for 5 or 6 years by this point, with varying levels of knowledge. ADHD was more, oh, this is a thing I should look into. Oh, okay. Oh, now I have it. Which obviously I've always had, but now there's a name for it. So there are certain things that get recontextualized. I've mentioned that I've suffered from depression. I had always internalized that as I suffer from one of the forms of depression. It turns out, but I didn't ever. What I actually had was undiagnosed ADHD, which manifested as depression at times. So I certainly was depressed, but I didn't have depression. And I'm using those words wrong, but there is a distinct difference in there somewhere. The most important part of that difference is obviously internally, where it's like I'm not quite the person I thought I was. But other things started to make sense. Like I am not a huge fan of exercise, and the reason for that is because I don't really get the whole endorphin rush thing that people do. And it's like, oh wait, but endorphins are linked. ADHD at its core is a problem with your dopamine system, with the way your brain regulates dopamine, and sort of adjacent stuff, of which the exercise, the endorphins are part of that. And so as I understand it, like, oh, that's not that uncommon. It's not every person with ADHD suffers from this, but I do, and there are non-trivial numbers which do. And all of a sudden, like, oh, the reason I don't enjoy exercise because I don't get that emotional uplift from it, which is because, and therefore it's always, I always look at it as a grind, whereas people who do go, oh, I'm looking forward to the high at the end of it. And so that explains some stuff. But there are also particular types of exercise that people in those positions do gravitate towards, a little more technical things where you're moving in a particular way, or you're achieving something rather than pick up the thing and put down the thing, like, yeah, or a run or whatever. So things like martial arts, those kind of things. And these are, and I look back and like, oh, these are things that I've always done through my life. And so all that sort of clicked into place. And there are a few other things like that are there. It's sort of linked lots of bits together. And that's why I do this thing, and that's why I do that thing. And it's the same with autism. Like I say, I've sort of identified internally as that for a lot longer. So it was a bit more sort of there, but it just explains certain social interactions. It explains the feeling of being different internally. I think I told you this story before, but when I was growing up, I had an impacted tooth. My adult tooth was growing sideways, and the dentist didn't pick it up for whatever reason. I got a new dentist for other reasons. And he said, well, we need to fix this now. There's a big lump in your mouth. Haven't you noticed it? I'm like, I'm a teenager. I have experience of one mouth. How am I supposed to know that it's wrong? And now it was removed and all the rest of it, and no problems there. But now when my mouth is the right shape, I still occasionally just go, oh, why is there a bit of the roof of my mouth missing? And it's perfectly normal now. But growing up that, and it's the same, it's like that, but much more so in your own head. I mean, you never understand what's going on inside of someone else's head. But my kind of assumption was that everyone's brain is broadly the same. And I'm, if I'm feeling something strange, it's like, actually, I'm just being dramatic. But no, now I have a medical piece of paper that says, no, your brain does actually work different from most other people.
Yeah, and language to communicate it as well.
Exactly.
And, even like you said earlier, like if I have ADHD, you have ADHD, our experiences are completely different. So even though we have one piece of paper that says essentially the same thing, like it is a completely different experience and outlook on life and effect on life and career and relationships and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's always important to remember. ADHD, autism, they exist on a spectrum. And I've been fortunate that I'm on it, but I'm not on the extreme end. And so I've lived the life that I've lived. But people who are can be affected by it vastly more, and so their experience will be far more crippling, potentially, and really impacted them in a way that is significantly more dramatic than it might have been for myself.
Yeah. So when we talk about neurodivergent traits, what would you say has helped in your career? And then what would you say has been difficult to navigate?
Yeah. So autism and ADHD both have variations of like hyperfocus, which is a bit like a flow, which is something that everyone can do, but it's a bit more destructive, in the sense that you start to forget basic functions. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yes, like 3 days later, it's like, oh, hey man, when's the last time I ate? That kind of thing. But on the other hand, it is very good for developing skills very quickly. That sort of arguably obsessive behavior, again, helps develop deep interests, which is very helpful. And so for me, working in computers, having a strong interest, shall we say, in those areas, means I go down rabbit holes, learn a lot, really delve into detail, which is, like I say, has problems, but is also extremely helpful for knowing the details in a detail-oriented space. And there are other ones like sustained attention is part of this. Pattern recognition is something that comes up with autism quite a lot. It's certainly helped me in sort of mathematics. It's helped me in development and in management. So dealing with people all the way through in different ways. But on the other hand, again, there are downsides if it runs amok. I mean, pattern recognition, you can start to see people behaving in a particular way, and then you can ascribe motivations, and that might be a perfectly legitimate one interpretation of it, but there might be several others. and they usually are. So you've got to always keep an eye on these things. And then other double-edged swords like direct communication, reduced social conformity is the nice way of framing that you're a bit strange, which is great if you're wanting to be a disruptor in the positive sense. You do think differently, you see things differently, and that if you're in the right environment, that can be extremely useful and extremely powerful. You do have to basically deal with the fact that you're constantly alone because of that same because of those same traits.
Yeah. Would you say as well, I think, in some work environments, people who don't necessarily fit the norm struggle a bit when it comes to being recognized for the work they do or the value they bring?
Yes, and again, that depends on that can certainly depend on the environment that you're working in, and the way that basically you market yourself in an organization. If you're not neurotypical, you certainly my experience is that uh, dealing with that side of social things is difficult. So if you're in a supportive environment, it can be very powerful. If you're less so, if you're in a less supportive environment, it can be you can be seen as a problem. You can be seen as disruptive. And certainly I've worked with people who other people have said that person is complicated and difficult to work with. So just, you know, take a step back. And I've eventually had a conversation with them and found them very insightful and very interesting. But what they don't do is frame their observations, their complaints, whatever, in a way that is socially acceptable, and therefore it just rams up against people not wanting to hear it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Mm. There's a lot of skills in that I've had to learn. I mean, I could easily be the awkward person and have been, I'm sure, at times. My various colleagues would no doubt go, yeah, yeah, he's very awkward. Um, but over the years, I've learned various ways of framing that my observations in ways that are more constructive to the organization, ways that are conducive to change rather than moaning in inverted commas. And that's a skill. I mean, it's a skill that everyone would need to develop, but it's a skill that, again, the social norms are don't work in the same way for myself. And I look at that situation and go, oh, no, I'm rambling.
I think, if you talk about being like mathematical and like scientific, it's almost then looking at this is a struggle or this is something that I need to learn, and then going away and using that scientific brain to almost teach yourself. I One of my friends was diagnosed with autism, and he just went out and read loads of books on communication. He's probably better at communication than anyone I know, and it's just that almost hyper focus on being good at a skill, even if it's not natural, you can still develop it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, he's almost certainly masking there, which is also a skill that most neurodivergent people learn. And it's a bit everybody learns a certain level of being a social chameleon, but when the person that you're presenting drifts further from the person who you actually are inside, or you start to lose sight of who that person inside might even be, it's definitely into into masking territory. It's something I've done without realizing it initially, but over the years sort of developed it extensively, done my entire life. The person who I am at home is very different from the person I am at work, very different from that person. Is very different from the person I am when I'm out and about, and so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, and it you sort of compartmentalize these learned skills. And this is the way I think about it, at least. Um, and so in this situation, I need to be able to do A, B, and C. So I learn how to do A, B, and C, and then I make sure that I'm able to do them. But it's all, I mean, ultimately, it's all just exhausting. It's like you're constantly being a bit different and constantly internally correcting yourself, and thinking that meta line. Is this the right thing to be doing? Am I being strange? Is the eye contact too much? Is it not enough? Um, and so on, on and on. Am I rambling? Am I not rambling? Have I given enough detail?
It's
Yeah,
exhausting.
and it's exhausting.
An actor has a job, maybe they're on stage for 2.5 hours. They are in a film, but they get breaks. If you're masking, you're constantly acting. And if that's 24 hours a day, that is exhausting.
Yeah, yeah, and certainly I find that there are a few people who I get to be a bit closer to my normal self with, and that doesn't come out very often. Mostly because I sort of identify more as like the software engineer as when I was younger, and there are very particular ways of communicating software engineering, and they lean themselves into things like direct communication and so on. And you just can't do that when you're more senior, and particularly since I've worked in the public sector, so I was a senior civil servant for a long while. You can't bluntly talk in the same way that you can do when you're a developer. And you go, that's rubbish. You've written an algorithm that fundamentally won't work, or it's terrible, and this is why. There's an objective truth there, which is quite pure and enjoyable.
Feedback framework when you're
Yeah.
discussing it as a manager versus if you're just a developer on the team.
Yeah, you've got to be a lot more sort of talk around it and think about how it's going to land and so on. Which is quite a different
skill.
skill set. Yeah.
So one of the things we went through is with your autistic traits, feeling the need to be perfect when you are setting out to do anything. So what I wanted to talk about was, you've said before you felt like achieving a goal felt like that was the bare minimum expected of you. And so when you set out to, from a developer to director of software engineering, that felt like it was what was expected rather than a success.
I mean, the career itself is, I wouldn't go that far, but my general thinking on life is around, well, first of all, I'm the sort of person that if I get a 9 out of 10 in a test, I want to look at the one to understand what's wrong with it. So that's helpful for pushing forward in terms of being better all the time. It's not so great in terms of celebrating one's own success.
Yeah.
And that sort of encapsulates a lot of how I work through life. Like when I passed my GCSEs, for example, I predicted what I was going to get. As in, if I try and strip an ego out of it, like I am capable of getting this set of marks.
Yeah.
For these subjects, I'm not just literally not good enough. So I did on our GCSE, I'm literally not good enough to get these marks. So I'm expecting these sorts of things. And then I think there was one was like, I could get this, but in order to do it, I had to learn a ton of vocabulary, and I am not going to do it. I will do enough, but I won't, hit the 100%. So I predicted exactly what I was going to get, and I was totally right. I think the only thing I did two Englishes, reading English language and English lit, and I think I predicted that I was going to get it one way. I'm going to get an A star in one and an A in the other. I think it was the other way around. They'd practice, but that was the only thing I got wrong. So and I'm quite good at prediction because it's pattern recognition and predictive modeling, all that kind of thing, which is very helpful. But again, in my head, for my GCSEs, I got 7 A stars and 4 A's, which is good results and marks. But I predicted it, so I got there and read it and went, well, I've not been surprised by this, so there's not a positive surprise here, so I'm not feeling amazing. I didn't fail to get what I was, so I'm not feeling that. It's just like, tick, what's my next thing? And that's the easiest one to talk about, but that's true about so many things in life. And that's could be a real problem when I'm like leading teams of people, because other people deserve to have their successes. And it's not like I don't like value what people are doing and so on. That mentality, I try very hard not to project that onto anyone else.
Yeah.
But it does mean that like actually celebrating is not really just part of my natural reactions. So in terms of learned behavior, which is how a lot of my persona is, it's a collection of learned behaviors. I've learned when this happens, I have to say nice things. And it's very hard to say this out loud because it doesn't deliberately devalue what other people are doing or any praise that they have, because it is genuinely meant. But it also sounds a bit, insert praise here, now say something nice, compliment this person's dress sense or whatever. It's like very, very mechanical.
No.
One of the reasons I relate to AI, because it thinks very similarly to the way I do.
A great answer. Well done. Next on to the list. No, I'm the same. I always have to say, if someone says, "How was your weekend?" I'll just tell them about my weekend, but I need to say, "And how was yours? What did you do?" And it is just learned behaviors. But I guess what's interesting about that is going from an individual contributor and developer, what was, like, why the move into management and how did you find it?
Before I answer that, just on the learned behavior thing, again, this is an insight into my contrary nature, which is more authentic. The how are you, I took years and years ago, I started answering that question with, I'm alive. And the number of people who don't even register those are the words, it's like it literally says nothing. Because people don't care about the answer.
No.
9 times out of 10. There is always the one who does actually ask that question because they want to know. But the number of people who go, how are you? I'm alive. Okay, well, let's talk about this. I'm like, yeah,
Brilliant.
brilliant. That tells you exactly how valuable that is. Why did I move into management?
Yeah.
So I have to say I was a developer. When I joined the government, I actually applied for the wrong job, which was entertaining. The place I was working didn't really have like the structure of different types of developers. So by being a developer for a long time, I was arguably a senior developer, but I didn't have that title. And a friend of mine said me a role, which said lead developer, and I thought, oh, that's a step up. I'll apply for that. Later on, discovered that there was a senior developer role in between these two things that maybe was more correct fit. So I ended up sort of being brought into GDS, and then they went, congratulations, and all of this is now yours. It's like, what? I'm in charge. Why? I don't understand. There were, at the time, there were 2 of us who were in this pretty new role for the organization, and he'd emerged from being a senior developer in the org, so he knew all the technical stuff. Well, we were both technical, but he knew the stuff that we were working on directly intimately because he'd written a lot of it, and he's, it's a very, very good auditor. And so I had to sort of find my niche around this. And so I adopted quite a lot of the more management side of things. And I got involved in a whole variety of quite interesting and harrowing at times, tricky things. Got quite involved in HR and from a leadership perspective, a lot of career pathways, all that side of things. And over time, I sort of gravitated more into that sort of space. And then because I was doing that when my boss left, they went, oh, wait, we need someone to replace him. I guess it's you. Yeah. And then I was head of software engineering. And I distinctly remember walking out on the day when we had this discussion, which was sort of came out of nowhere. I stood in the foyer of the building, but went, I'm in charge of this now. Oh no. What have I done?
How did I get you?
Mistakes were made.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people struggle with is imposter syndrome, isn't it? When you're,
oh yeah,
like, did I deserve this success? But you obviously along the way have picked up so many skills, and also the ability to then develop new skills or improve upon what you have to get to that position.
I mean, imposter syndrome is a really good motivator.
Yeah.
He says facetiously. Don't recommend that to anyone else, but it does. I mean, it does keep you watching over your own shoulder. Make sure that you're not getting complacent. And certainly for me, all these things coming together, like basic thing, this constant feeling that I don't really know what I'm doing, making me constantly analyze what I'm doing, which makes me quite good at what I'm doing because it's deliberate. And that's the thing when I'm mentoring people. Total coaching, and it's very like really try to get into this, like be deliberate. Whatever you're deciding to do, decide to do it, and understand why you've decided to do it, rather than stuff's happening and you're sort of meandering through this. I mean, for me, that's kind of one big thing. I let myself fall into leadership stuff and then work through it. I have a strong belief that people with a technical background, hands-on, like people who actually know how the code works and so on, those voices need to be heard at more senior levels because so many decisions or so many things are now powered by digital technology all over the place. basically everything. And decisions are made in rooms with when nobody understands like the limitations or indeed the positive, like the possibilities. And it's really, really important. I've seen so many places which have huge problems because they haven't had a technical voice in the room at an appropriate level. And I'll give you one small example, if you like. And this is from much earlier in my career. The place where I was working wanted to create a system where you could upload a Word document, and it would create this sort of LinkedIn type of profile that I could give it an abstract document, and as opposed to anything structured. And this was a long time before like the sort of AI that we've got now. And so basically what they wanted was modern AI,
Yeah.
not 20 years, 15, 20 years ago. And it was a great idea in on paper, and it went around senior management, then around middle management. And by the time it reached the like developers who all went, this is literally impossible. There was a lot of people who was like professionally invested in, we didn't want to go back up the chain going, yeah, actually we can't do that. That's not an idea that will ever function. Like the amount of time and reputation that was wasted.
Yeah.
And if there just needs somebody in those rooms early on going, yeah, that's just not going to work. Let's think about this.
A lot of money saved too on salaries and time, I reckon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's one example. And certainly I've got much more senior examples later in my career.
Yeah, we won't go into those. I hear it a lot too, like use cases for AI and stuff like that with my clients. A lot of people don't actually know what problem they're solving with it or anything like that. So having those voices are really important. So
Exactly.
I guess with everything that we've talked about, how do you use your experience with your diagnosis or your experience throughout your career just to support others?
So I mentioned that I do a lot of coaching and mentoring.
Yeah.
And I keep doing that and trying to help others develop. I mean, I want to, coming from a technical background, I've moved into areas that are quite tricky to get to with my sort of skills and experience. Technologists can quite easily get quite senior. And so, for example, I didn't have the budget until I was director, which is kind of ridiculous. But alongside that, I was a treasurer in a church, and that experience carried me through of that sort of financial management, carried me through some interviews, so I could talk about that. And so, looking at the future of my industry, I think it's really important to try and I haven't just tried to get places. I've tried to build ladders and create opportunities for other people to move through and run, whether it's following or come in on side or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, and then that's true just for a profession. And it's also true for people with neurodiverse, people who are neurodiverse. So like I say, I do a lot of mentoring, a lot of coaching. I think the way that I think about things, because it's quite detailed, it's quite very systematic. I try to build systems and then think in that way. It makes me quite good at explaining reasons, rationale. This is why, and in detail, this is why I think this. And you may or may not disagree, but at least you've got that body of evidence that you can work through and decide for yourself. So yeah. So in terms of helping others and giving back, like I said, a lot of that, I've done a lot of building of communities over time, to a lot of writing, and a lot of my stuff is it's online, and my thought process, and you go back and read through them. There's a whole series of moving from hands-on technology into different types of management. There's a lot of how do I process this thought, this approach. And I try to be very rigorous on these things and really break them down to make them as accessible rather than like, I reckon this kind of thing.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. And it's been a genuine pleasure just to get to know everything in more detail as well. I know we've had a few conversations, but it's been good to hear it. Yeah, again. And I think there's a lot of values in what you've been sharing online. So what we'll do is put the links into the comment or into the blog post, and people can have a read through and just see how you can get from hands-on technical and then move through into leadership. And there's a few things in there about the challenges that people can face, and that's neurodivergent or neurotypical, I think everyone has imposter syndrome to an extent, masking, maybe not to the exhaustion levels, but it's good to see that you can navigate all of that and be where you are now. Too. Is there anything else you want to add? Is there anything else going on? Anything going on in your life?
Um, we could talk about the candles that I make.
Oh, I love the candles that you make. I honestly do. What was the last batch that you made? It was
There was a couple of little cows in there, and then there was a stick with a snake wrapped around it.
so good. I love.
But yeah, I suppose the other thing to say is that I mean, I feel obviously quite passionate about all of this stuff. So if anybody ever wants to reach out, communicate, then I guess we're going to include my LinkedIn link somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And hire you as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, yes. If anyone wants to hire me, then yeah, give me a call.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again, and thank you everyone for watching.